Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard their point. Now, hear the counterpoint on Libertarian Counterpoint podcasts.
And thank you for joining us today. With me is John Cameron, and we have a special guest, Mr. Robert Meyer. He is a political, economic, and financial analyst. And before we start today, we want to make sure we say that, please, we are not giving financial advice. Any individual financial advice needs to be gotten through your own personal financial advisor. Disclaimer right off the top seems to be going around these days. And for more information about Robert, please visit ramoneyjourney.com. Okay, gentlemen, we have had a interesting last week or so in the stock market, and we actually booked Robert about a month ago, so the timing of this is actually pretty convenient. We kind of seem to work out. Can you explain to us, Robert, about kind of what's going on with this whole GameStop theory and kind of the modern monetary theory that's backing it? Because there's been lots of conversations about, the Redditor side, the emotional side of it. There's been lots of conversations about the hedge fund side of it, but not many people have talked about the underpinnings, the monetary theory underpinnings.
Okay, it starts with the Federal Reserve System and their stimulus programs or bailouts, and also their artificially low interest rates, like near 0%. And that obviously penalizes the average person. Let's say you're on a fixed income, or the fact that you want to put your money in a savings account, you don't want to speculate in the stock market. That kind of ends that. So the only way you're going to be able to make any money is possibly speculate in the stock market, and most people aren't savvy enough to do that. But the way it applies to modern monetary theory is it didn't cause any real price inflation in the market because of the velocity of money's plummeted. And that's because people are in fear, especially during the pandemic. They're afraid to spend too much money, at least most people are. So these people that believe in modern monetary theory, they think the fact that all this money creation did not cause inflation, although it caused the stock market bubble and other asset bubble. They think that they can create as much money as possible and still control inflation, which is a big fallacy because they're not looking at the psychological facts behind inflation. Of course, the classical definition of inflation is increasing the quantity of money. That's increasing the money supply. Most people look at price increases now as inflation, so they've kind of made the effect the cause. But modern monetary theorists, excuse me, they think that they can create as much money as possible, spend it on whatever they want. They can pay off student loans. They can have all kinds of stimulus programs. They can have basic universal income. In fact, they can fund any kind of program they want. And if there happens to be inflation, they believe that, well, we can just raise taxes and siphon the money off the marketplace, which is a total fallacy because they don't understand the psychological effects of inflation. Once people believe that the depreciation of the currency is going to continue forever, they start getting rid of it as fast as possible. And then you have high inflation and possibly hyperinflation. And anyway, their tax schemes won't work because unless you're an idiot, you're going to try to protect your money by, sending it overseas or investing in precious metals or even doing something else with it. Tax hedges are going to, of course, they'll try to get rid of those too, but I don't think they'll be able to. So the whole theory is basically flawed.
Yeah, they act like people can't move. Like California's seen an exodus of rich people, middle class, and the lower wealthy class moving because
and poor,
they can't afford it.
And poor because the people that move themselves are lower middle class or lower class. And all the numbers are showing that the U-Haul business is going crazy. But what I'd love to see is the numbers on moving services. Like, because if you're got any kind of means at all, you're not about to pack boxes and haul them on your back up a ramp into a U-Haul and drive somewhere. You're going to pay somebody to do that. And we haven't seen numbers on that. And when we do, they're going to be astounding. I got a question. I typically, whenever a new theory of money comes up, my first thought, Robert, is that, well, this is just a way for people who want to spend more money than they can to just like people get a new credit card and they get a cash advance on the credit card to pay the bill for the last credit card they have. It's really like a pyramid scheme, but they label it something new so that they can outspend the amount of revenue that's coming in. And every time I took a look at it, it sounded like total mumbo jumbo to me. And they keep quoting authors from like 1905 as writing the seminal papers on it, and I'm looking at it, and if I'm going to try to rephrase what you said in my words and see if I'm close to the description. They believe that you don't have, the only reason you use taxes, and you don't even need to sell bonds because you're just basically printing the money and shipping it out there, and you control the supply of money. But if inflation does take off, you simply tax the money back out of the system. But if inflation doesn't take off, you don't need to tax it. You're just printing money. Is that a very short, would you say that's a decent, very short description of modern monetary theory, or did I miss something?
That is correct. And also because of that, they believe deficits don't matter.
Yeah.
So if you have a 27 trillion deficit, it doesn't matter. You can take it to 39 trillion, 50 million, trillion, 100 trillion. But the problem still is the psychology behind inflation, because they just completely disregard the velocity of money. Normally during, if you were under the gold standard and you had, the only real inflation you had was if they increased the quantity of gold, mine more gold. But even then, prices would gradually fall because production would outweigh that. That would be the velocity of money would probably stay pretty much the same. It would just fluctuate some. But they don't understand that if they keep printing all this money, all they do is look at Venezuela or any other place where they've had, or even Germany in the early 20s. All they have to do is look at the psychological aspects. People are
Zimbabwe.
Yeah, Zimbabwe. That's a perfect example. All they have to do is look at history and look at human psychology to know that if your money you suddenly realize it's losing purchasing power, you're going to want to get rid of it and get something of real value.
And also I think this is logical, but correct me if I'm wrong. If you've got a credit card, it's got like, I don't know, $30,000-$40,000 limit on it, and you know that you've got an income stream that somebody's going to keep ratcheting up to match inflation, you'll go out and buy whatever you can, because when you pay that credit card off, because you or I actually have to pay our debts, unlike the government. When you go and pay it off, you might pay it off for cents on the dollar instead of paying, $1 back plus whatever interest rate you're being charged on money you can borrow. You're paying back 30 cents or 50 cents or 70 cents with whatever interest rate you're being charged. So the aspect of inflation pushes people to, if they can, leverage themselves with funny money even more, which adds to the inflation. Is that correct?
That is correct, although it's kind of rather dangerous because there's a slight chance that we could have a deflationary class before we have the hyperinflation. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of dangerous.
We were taught, our generation, I'm assuming, not the young'un that's sitting over there to your left on the screen. We were taught what you do is you save a certain percent, you give a certain percent to charity, and you expect through your savings and being thrifty you put it somewhere and it's going to generate a safe return on investment. And that safe return on investment was usually like 1.5 percentage points above whatever treasury bonds were paying.
Right.
You could get a CD or something. If you want to take a little more risk, you would put it in blue chip stocks, or you'd buy real estate. And except in California, where you've had huge inflation in real estate prices, and what this economy that we've been in for the last 10 years is basically punished people for thrift. It's rewarded people for running up debt and punished people for not running up debt. And every time I read it, it strikes me as BS. How about if I just say BS?
It is BS.
And it's every time the yahoos in power want to want to do something. They just come up with a new theory to promote it. And I know it's kind of your show today, but I always think that what a rule in physics, a rule works for this much of something or that much of something. I can't really do this on the screen properly because I'm not very coordinated, apparently. But apparently in monetary policy, the rule that applies to an individual, which is if you run up debt, you got to pay it off,
Right.
doesn't apply on the macro scale. And whenever anybody starts waving that flag around, I think, ooh, somebody's trying to do a shell game on me, and they're just justifying writing checks that don't have anything to cover it with. Yeah. That's what
yeah. Here's another thing. Like you mentioned GameStop, for instance. I mean, if we didn't have the Fed pumping up the quantity of money like they were, and the money now, most of it goes into the stock market, you wouldn't have anything like GameStop. And then you have JP Morgan, they were manipulating the price of silver, and these hedge funds are trying to short these things like GameStop, which kind of makes sense since, there's nothing behind them. But that gave these millennials or young people a chance to pull some quick money out and get even with them.
See the tea I made for you? Sorry.
And now they're talking about doing that on the silver market, since you have about 100 paper contracts for every ounce of silver. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. But I think now that JP Morgan's probably wise to what's up, although the silver price is up 7 or 8% today, I believe.
Yeah, it's around 30.
It's kind of dangerous to keep trying that, although they succeeded at doing causing the short squeezes, for a while. They're not going to get by with it long because, it's like George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. And those millennials on Reddit aren't in it.
Yeah, I was thinking that because what's happened is that the Fed stepped in, but they didn't the regulatory agencies didn't step in to help the little guy.
No.
They stepped in to help the big guy, because the big guys are the ones that give the political donations to the party that supports having all the regulators. So it's who's going to win that fight.
Well, I guess you have to define victory. Is victory just to cause pain to the hedge funds, and then you don't really care if you lose money? Because for a lot of people I've been talking to in the whole Reddit issue, people who are participating in it, they don't really care. They went in with $1,000, kind of like you're going to Vegas. You go in, you put in $20 into the slot machine, you win 100, you just start playing with that 100, and you don't really care what happens, how much you walk out with, as long as you still have that initial $20.
Yeah.
And so they're just playing with their money at this stage. And so, victory for them is not actually walking away with a pocket full of money. It'd be nice if it does, but victory for them is simply causing pain to the system. And the system doesn't seem to understand that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, when people talk about hedge funds as if they're evil. And, all hedge fund managers are basically is people who manage mutual funds that normal people can't buy. You can't buy them on the market. It is a private club, but they're simply managing people's money, and a lot of them are super wealthy. But
no, it's the behavior. I think is the problem.
If I've done well enough to qualify to buy something from or put my money with a hedge fund manager, then I should be applauded, not denigrated. And if those people end up making $100 million a year because they've made me $1 million, why should they be punished? And all these people not all these people, and most of the Reddit people are young. The way I understand it, they're young. Their parents have money in mutual funds, and that's what's going to support their retirement. And the loans they're given to the kids who are playing with the money in Reddit. And they, if they push around the mutual funds or something, because it's not just hedge funds. I mean, there's a lot of public, there's a lot of pension fund money that's got a little bit of money in silver, and they short stocks on occasion or buy puts or calls. So anyway, but I'm taking away from Robert's time, so I should shut up.
That does make sense. My concern would be, if you're in the stock market now, is it could go to 50,000, 100,000. Whether it'll keep up with inflation is another thing. There's money to be made, Matter of fact, I've played in it myself. But what I expect there could be a 20 to 30% correction. I can't say for sure, but once the crash does happen, and we have a possible bond collapse, because a lot of those bonds are nothing, they're not even A-rated or anything. The stock market could go down 60, 70%, but nobody can guarantee that. Could go down even further. But that's one thing, you're playing with fire. If there's money to be made, I can see taking a chance, as long as you don't risk your total financial wealth. I mean, you can go play the markets if you want to. Another thing I forgot to mention about modern monetary theory is the way inflation works. And here's what nobody seems to understand. Whenever there's an increase in the quantity of money, the people that benefit are the ones that get the money first, because the price of assets haven't risen yet. The price of goods and services haven't gone up. So they can buy and purchase at present prices. But as the money moves through the system and prices start rising, the people at the end of it who get the money last are the ones that the purchasing power is taken away from, because they have to pay higher prices. It's even the same thing invested in assets like stocks. All this money is going into stocks. Finally, everybody says, hey, I need to get in the stock market. It's been going up, 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 up. But if they're the last ones to get in, they're the ones that are going to get burned at the end.
Yeah. Well, I always like to say the end consumer pays all costs.
Yeah.
And you end up with, the last guy in, kind of last guy in, first guy out, right? You're the one who loses all your money. And so it's just,
let me ask you, I'm sorry, James, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go for it, John.
Ask a clarifying question to make sure I just kind of rephrase what you said in my own words. So the first people that are getting this money are the big merchant banks, and the banksters, as Richard and I like to refer to them. I think he used that term, and then I heard it from him, and I love it. The banksters, they get the money, and they get inflated semi-real money, and then they turn around, and if every dollar of semi-real money they get, they lend out $10 of funny money. So they're taking funny money and adding a multiplier to it. And the people who get that funny money after it's been multiplied are folks like you and I who use it to buy a car or a home or whatever. So the people, the end users, let's call them wage earners. Are they people who are actually working for a living at a job somewhere? Or, right now, a lot of them are collecting kind of inflated unemployment benefits. Not in California because the system's broken, but other places where the giveaway works. So it's the banksters and the merchant bankers and Wall Street that get it first, and use that money to buy assets before those prices are inflated, pass it through, and the consumer, the working man and woman, are the ones that end up paying higher prices for it. That
is pretty much correct. Of course, depends what you're buying. Not all prices and services go up at the same rate. There could even be a few that drop because of less demand or increased production. But overall, the average citizen who gets the money last isn't going to pay the price. Somebody has to pay the price for inflation. Money isn't wealth. Goods and services are wealth. Money is not wealth. It's just it's a medium of exchange. That's all it is.
So how much does this in my neighborhood, gentrification is a big issue where people who are living in a neighborhood simply can no longer afford to live in that neighborhood. How much have these, we'll call them absurdly low interest rates, actually fueled that cost? That's a inflationary cost that the poor people actually have to pay or can't pay, their housing costs, because people who are a little bit higher up on the chain have more access to money. Has that actually caused the price of my neighborhood to get more expensive beyond what it actually should be?
Okay. Problem is with the inflationary money, it did not actually go, even when the corporations got the money, a lot of them bought back their own stock instead of, increasing production or putting it into research and technology. And what happens is that that means that the consumers aren't really getting in more good they would otherwise, and services, and the prices would be lower. So that's already preventing that to happen, the fact that the money is going into the financial sector. And another thing is, if it wasn't for all this money being created. We'd have lower prices than we have now. I mean, if you look at the price of a new house or a price of an automobile, or even go to the grocery store, I've noticed that myself, prices are going up. Otherwise, if you had a honest economic system backed by gold, and you didn't have the Federal Reserve increasing the quantity of money or the Treasury printing up more money, the consumer would be paying lower prices. So that would be a big, nice. I like that.
I'm sorry, I had to grab a silver quarter, an actual silver quarter I got from a, where is it there? I got a silver dollar somewhere, but this is real money to me. And
I haven't opened this yet, but here's a roll of real silver dimes.
yeah.
There it is.
So it in the past, every time, let me start again. Every government throughout history that's gone to fiat currency, in other words, lessened the value of their currency by increasing the supply, has collapsed. Every single one throughout history. Romans did it. That's why they actually put edges. They put little edges on silver coins. These are all worn down. Maybe they were scraped off, so that you could tell when somebody sliced a little bit of silver off the edge of the silver coin or the gold coin. And in Roman times, when you find coins from the beginning of the Roman Empire from when the Romans moved into Britain, the coins are mostly made out of gold and silver. But as the empire started to get a little leaking at the joins, let's say, the money became more and more base metal. So correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, but has there ever been in the history of the world a government that created fiat currency where the economy of that empire or whatever it is didn't collapse under the weight of funny money? Do you know of one?
No, and there's not going to be one. So the good old USA's heading the same way. Excuse me. Thing is, though, it's an international problem because nobody's on the gold standard. So all companies are creating fiat monies like crazy. So there's going to be a general collapse. It just depends. The dollar right now is the international currency, and that's not going to last forever either.
No, that's why they want to stop people from using things like Bitcoin, because if there's alternatives, people are bailing on the dollar. And I know over the last 3 or 4 months, my wife's English, so I pay attention to international currency. The pound is not getting pounded anymore. They've stopped trying to punish the English for leaving commie Europe. Well, they're still trying, but they're not punishing them as bad. And I think the pound's about $1.37, whereas not that long ago it was $1.18. And the euro was $1.08 when we went to Paris last year. Was it last year or year before last? Year before last. And now it's at $1.20. So the dollar's already taken a beating in international. And I read something that's kind of frightening. The official number for GDP or debt to GDP worldwide was about 78%. 78% of governments typically had worldwide 78% of the gross national product, or GNP, or GDP, gross domestic product, in debt. And after the latest round of collapsed economy propped up by funny money, it's like 95%. And that doesn't count all of the unfunded public employee pensions that are out there. I mean, California is probably $1 trillion in debt with what it owes teachers and firemen and overpaid public employees. So, it's the rate of collapse, or the rate of leakage in the economic system, is accelerating. At least that's what I'm seeing. You're seeing the same thing, Robert?
Yes, I think in the United States, that ratio's hit about 130, 135%. So they've noticed once it goes above 90%, each dollar produces less than what is printed. If you add an extra dollar, it may only produce 65 cents worth of goods and services added to GDP. So they're in a losing situation. Now, modern monetary theorists point to Japan and say, well, they got something like 235%, but where's their economy gone the last 30 years? And their currency is in the international monetary currency that's considered the currency. So it's not going to work. So this modern monetary theory, they think they can drive it to 200%, 250%, 300%, and it won't matter.
Yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with you, Robert. It's already mattering. If I mean, people would see it in the cost of food, but where you normally get people rioting and looting is that when the poorest people start not being able to buy bread, then or have to do without something that they want, then they realize that there's something going on and they start getting itchy trigger fingers and parading through the streets. But with the aid, they don't call it aid to families with dependent children anymore. They call it something else. That program now includes something like 30% of the population in this country. So the poor people don't see the effect that you or I see when we go to the grocery store. They because they just hand over that little credit card or debit card, and they get food.
It's called the Star Card here, I believe, in Texas.
Yeah. No, you're in Texas. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we can actually see the long-term effects of that monetary policy on our streets. We are watching the homeless, rise in California because you can no longer afford to buy a house. In my neighborhoods, they closed down a bunch of low-income motels because of blight, and now we have a bunch of people living on the sidewalk instead. So, helping the blight didn't seem to do much to help the blight. So, Robert, we got less than a minute. Is there anything you wanted to kind of close up with?
Yeah, this is something we probably could do in another show, but it's what we're going to get eventually is universal basic income. And that's going to have a lot of bad effects. People think they get their $2,000 check a month. Oh, this is great. But they don't realize that the consequences of that and the price they're going to pay. They're going to pay with their liberty and freedom for that universal basic income. But that, I believe, is part of modern monetary theory. And I believe that is on its way, especially when you see what happens. We may have a quick recovery, do the so-called vaccine, which is another episode you can have on if you're allowed to talk about it, that is. But I see there's a possible short-term recovery coming maybe in the spring or something. But I think after that, we got some real problems, and that's when they'll be introducing universal basic income.
Well, Robert, we'll have to get you back on to have a longer conversation. For more information about Robert, you can go to ramoneyjourney.com and read what he's got. He's got a lot of interesting articles on there to read. And from all of us here at Libertarian Counterpoint, we want to thank you for watching. You can visit us at libertariancounterpoint.com. And please remember to love everybody.
Thank you, James.
Yes, thanks.
Thanks for the education, Robert.